In the previous session, we were learning about the barriers of communication, those factors which can hinder communication, or those factors which make communication not that effective. And we have already seen language related barriers or linguistic barriers, which is called as semantic barriers, and certain barriers which are connected with state of mind related barriers, and we called it psychological barriers. In this session, we will be learning about two more other barriers, and those are organizational barriers and personal barriers. Organizational barriers and personal barriers. There are certain barriers in organization which can hinder the communication within the organization. From organization to organization it differs, but there are certain factors inside the organization which can hinder the communication, and we are going to learn about that. Along with that, we will be learning about some personal factors also, or some personal hindrances or personal barriers we call it, that differs from person to person. So we are entering into this session and we are going to learn about organizational barriers of communication and personal barriers of communication. Now, what is organizational barriers of communication? Organizational barriers of communication are those barriers which are connected to organization structure, the structure of the organization, how it is being arranged, the authority relationship, how authority is being decided and how much each person will be exercising, all those things, rules and regulations, those particular statements given, or what to do and what not to do inside the organization, which is being made clear. So all those things which are related to organizational structure, authority relationships, rules and regulations, which can hinder the communication. All these things, if it is going in a normal manner, fine, but when these things are put in such a way that it affects the communication, we call it by the name organizational barriers of communication. Organizational barriers of communication. Now we will see which are the organizational barriers of communication. First one can be organizational policy. What is policy? Policies are general statements which guides thinking and action. We have learned in planning. Now, each organization will have certain base ideas which is guiding thinking and action. So, if such a policy is very strict, or such a policy is not allowing free flow of communication, if the policy made by the organization is not allowing free flow of communication, for example, in an organization, if it is decided that everything is to be conveyed to the manager and only with permission or approval of manager, anything, any minute thing in an organization can be done. It's a centralized pattern. So, if organizational policy is saying that it has to follow a centralized pattern, if it is not supporting free flow of communication, because everything and anything, if it is to get the permission of manager, it will be quite difficult. So it is following a centralized pattern that creates a trouble in communication. So likewise, if certain policies are there, no interdepartmental collaboration must be there. So if it is a policy, such kind of policies which is not allowing free flow of communication can create a trouble in communication. So certain policies in the organization can become a barrier. Second one is rules and regulations. Certain rigid rules, when rules are being made, it is made in such a way it cannot be changed at all. Even when situation arises or when situation demands, we cannot change it. Rigid rules or complicated procedures. When a decision is to be taken, when something is to be done, it has to get the sign of all the managerial levels, not only the concerned managers, all the managerial levels. So it's a procedural delay. There can be procedural delay. Or when we are saying communication through a prescribed channel only, again that is a procedure. In this way only you can communicate. You cannot communicate when it demands. You cannot communicate through using short ways. You have to go through the particular path which it is given. That is a procedure which is being said. So certain rules and regulations, if it is very strict or if it is very rigid and if it is complicated, again communication can become difficult. For the situation required, communication cannot be done. That is also a problem. So again, rules and regulations can become a organizational barrier of communication. Again, status. Now status is another problem which can create a psychological distance. See, when we are communicating to a superior, every time we are not that comfortable because we have a feeling that they are at a very higher position, they are in a different position, they can take action against us. Such a lot of things will be troubling us. So there is a psychological distance we are keeping between subordinate and superior. There can be a psychological distance. This is because of the position one person is holding, another person is at a lower position. There can be a psychological distance. At the same time, certain times a certain person who is at higher position may think, oh, I am at a higher position, it's not fair to be with them, or it is not fair to keep them in my level or to communicate to them. So they will try to keep a distance. That's also another psychological distance. So both the ways, status can become a factor which is hindering communication in organization. The levels each one is holding can create a problem. Again, that is an organizational barrier of communication. Fourth one is complexity in organizational structure. Complexity in organizational structure. Complexity in organizational structure. Now, if the organizational structure, the superior subordinate levels which is being decided, if it is too much, too many levels, it becomes complex. There is a chance that communication can get delayed because it has to be communicated to all levels, and at the same time there is a chance that the message can be distorted, scattered, because it has to go through number of levels. So that is also a problem. When the organizational structure is complex or very big, very large, communication becomes difficult. Again, organizational facilities. What all facilities in organization to make better communication, whether there is a complaint box or whether there is a, suggestion box, meetings, all these things are organizational facility where communication is facilitated. If such kind of facilities are not there, again communication within an organization will be hindered. So what all facilities organizations are providing in order to make sure communication happens, again that is also another area where communication can be hindered, and that is also another organizational barrier. So we have seen 5 barriers of organization related barriers of communication. Now I was saying we will be discussing one more type of barrier, and that is personal barriers. Personal barriers are personal factors of both sender as well as receiver. That means from person to person it differs, which can create influence, whether sender, whether it be receiver, whether it be sender. If some of the factors of them, each individual, can create some influence on communication and which can create trouble in communication, such kind of factors of sender and receiver is called as personal barriers of communication. Now we will see what are the personal barriers of communication. Fear of challenge to authority. Some of the superiors, if you are watching, you can see that those superiors doesn't encourage certain persons to talk too much, because often they feel it as challenging them, or it is a challenge for them. They feel as if it is a challenge for them. So if they feel that the other person is challenging him, challenging his authority, questioning his authority, or raising questions on his authority, many a times the problem is that the person, the superior person who is at superior level, have a tendency to suppress it or to withhold it. That means not allowing them to communicate. So if the superior is feeling that another person or subordinate is challenging him, there is a chance that the subordinate will be suppressed or withhold from communicating. So that is a personal problem of that particular superior. Not every superiors are like that. There are superiors like that. Okay. Second one is lack of confidence of superior on his subordinates. Common thing. Common thing. When I have trust in you, I'll communicate to you freely. But whenever I have lost trust in you, I will not communicate. So, if I have a confidence, you are my children and you will keep things within you what has been discussed, I will surely communicate, I will ask your opinions, I will consider your suggestions. But if I have not trust in you, automatically I will refrain from doing so. I will not ask you suggestions, I will not ask you for giving opinions, because I have no trust in you. So, this lack of confidence on subordinates, only if I am feeling that you people can do, I will allow you to give opinions, suggestions and all. If I have no confidence, surely I will not give ear to you, I will not hear you. So, that is also another personal barrier. Third one is unwillingness to communicate. Unwillingness to communicate. Subordinate is not ready to communicate. Subordinate is not prepared to communicate. Subordinate don't want to communicate. Either be of fear, either be of anger, either be of anything else. If the person doesn't want to communicate, it can create a problem. It can be of any factor, any matter. If the person is unwilling to communicate, whether it be superior, whether it be subordinate, of multivarious reasons, again that can create a problem. They are not willing to communicate. So that can create a problem. That is also a personal problem. Unwillingness, not prepared or not willing to communicate. Fourth one is lack of proper incentives. Think of such a situation where you give a suggestion which is very much benefiting the organization, but nobody is acknowledging that you have given that suggestion. They considered it as an organization suggestion. Then next time onwards you will not surely come up with a suggestion. So, only when a motivation is given, only when an incentive, something to encourage you is given, it can be a good word, it can be an appreciation, it can be a gift, it can be money or anything. Only when you get an incentive, you will be encouraged to communicate. So, many a times this lack of proper incentives, if incentives or appreciation or gift or whatever be, acknowledgement is not given, there is a chance that you will put your leg back, put your feet back, and you will prefer not to give any suggestion, because the suggestion you have given which have benefited the organization was never acknowledged with your name. No incentives were there. Such kind of thing also can pull you back from giving opinions, pull you back from communicating. So again, that is also considered as a personal barrier. So we were discussing about personal barriers and organizational barriers.